Throughout this video, the French language policies in areas of education, politics, media and signage will be discussed in comparison to the Australian language policies in these areas. To define language policy, it refers to the deliberate actions taken in regards to the use of language within a country decided by the government through legislations. France is a country of Europe and has a population of approximately 63 million people. Its national language is French with over 60 million L1 users and over 2 million L2 users. However, there are 23 individual languages which range from non-existent, indigenous, institutional, progressing and endangered. Some of these include Spanish, Armenian and Portuguese.
The attitude of the French government towards national language policy has until recently been built strongly on a platform of monolingualism, with French being the only accepted official language of the country and its constituents. This concept of a one-nation state began with the cultural overturn of the French Revolution and made its way into language policy in the form of elimination tactics, stamping out many regional variants to standardize an equal version of French and attempt to create a more cohesive nation. This attitude has not only affected mainland France, however, as a significant amount of regional variants in other languages are from overseas territories. France has possession of multiple territories and collectivities across the globe due to its significant exploration over the centuries, and many mainland laws apply throughout this empire. These include language policies. Despite the great linguistic diversity present within the territories, legally French is still the single official language. As a result, it is given precedence in social interactions such as legal, educational, and business contexts. Australia, on the other hand, has been a multicultural society from its early years, but has faced its own issues with elitism when it comes to languages. Studies such as SLAUT has found a distinct lack of nationwide statistics when looking into patterns of language education under Australian policies, as records across educational sectors were limited from state to state. Litico puts forward this reason for the lack of intensive language programs across wider Australia. The problem with having an economic rationale for language learning is that the levels of language skills needed for high-level economic activity require intensive and long-term language programs. In this way, there is a distinction between the politics of language policy in Australia and those in France. In the latter, the governing bodies involves a cultural language divide, with the focus on assimilation into French language and culture. In Australia, however, despite having no official language, the divide is more economic. Maintaining languages takes time and money politicians would rather invest in other things, despite the new level of social and economic use said languages could achieve if spoken and understood more widely.
The law in France dictates that all signage and commercial advertising must be available in French, although other languages are also permitted with a French translation first. The city of Toulouse in the south of France is a major contributor to the public visibility of the regional language Occitan. Whilst French law recognises the country's regional language in terms of national heritage, the official supremacy of French remains constitutionally unchallenged. The bilingual street signs in central Toulouse recognise this leadership by always displaying French above Occitan. On the other hand, they also suggest a preference for the regional language, as Occitan overshadows French in the meaning associations of street names and their translation and adaptation on the lower plaques. In addition, in Brittany, the road signs demonstrating landmarks, street names, directions, etc. are always written in French first, for example, Office de Tourisme, and underneath are written in the Breton version, The Underested. The use of both French and Breton on the road signs represents a regional arrangement to reconcile the demands of both the local and national identity. In contrast to French language policy, Australia has no policy designating English as an official language. Road signs in Australia are regulated by each state's government, but are standardised overall throughout the country. In April 2018, Strathfield City Council voted for a motion that states all signage is to be displayed in the English language and may have a translation in another language, but must not be more than 30% of the overall size of the sign. On the other hand, in 2017, multilingual signs were introduced along the Great Ocean Road to help international tourists safely navigate the popular tourist route. Over 7 million people use the Great Ocean Road every year, with the largest proportion of tourists visiting from China. Trucks undertaking roadworks on the Great Ocean Road displayed messages in Mandarin and English to alert international drivers to change traffic conditions.
Behind the bright light of the television screen, headlines of the newspaper and broadcast of the radio is a principle of language policy. We might not realize it, but language policy acts as a foundation as to how organizations and individuals alike are able to communicate through media. These policies are set as a guideline in France and Australia to instruct as well mandate the use of language in the many sectors of media. In saying, France has taken great measures in the use of French language in media. A prime example of this is the Loi-Tarbonne law. 20 years ago, in 1994, Loi-Tarbonne was implemented to not only regulate languages in the public sector, but also the use of French in other aspects of media, such as the private as well. This extends to the requirements concerned with individuals to publish their work in the French language. For example, radio broadcasters are to use official terms approved by the government. It should be noted that within the L'audubon law, French must be used in all advertisements, whether it be written or spoken, in all aspects of the public media. Although exceptions can be made in regard for slogans that form typically part of a trademark. For instance, Nike, just do it. The progression of a language obviously includes the natural assimilation of foreign words. This is more likely when a foreign word originates from a technical or cultural environment. The law appears to be a political strategy employed to push through the French language policy. Now, the L'audubon has limited direct effect on the French media but serves as a basis of the element of linguistic protection. In contrast, in Australia, English is widely used in the media of written communication and cultural transmissions such as television, print media, and radio. Although in an unplanned way, the media impacts on the informal learning of languages, especially English. The implementation of language policy pays systematic attention to the possibilities which modern technologies offer for planned language education, specifically the availability for creative use of technology for language maintenance and planning. This extends to a wide variety of languages. A prime example is the SBS, which broadcasts a diverse selection of programs in different languages. This contributes to the provision of information to the public in different forms of media.
Language policies in regard to education in both France and Australia has varied over the years. In 1789, the use of regional languages in Alsace was outlawed, and France began to follow a French-only policy as of the 1789 Revolution, with a Jacobinism ideology suggesting that in order to be considered French, one should speak French. To compare, during 1901 to 1960s, the Australian assimilation policy caused immigrants to lose their languages. Fast forward to 1939, the French ministry allowed foreign educators to provide contemporary foreign language lessons in primary schools, which included grammar, history, and geography of the teacher's native country. This class was only offered to students with parental consent. To compare, Australia's 1987 national policy on language includes that all Australians enjoy high standards of Australian English, all Australians enjoy bilingualism, and all immigrant languages and Aboriginal languages are accepted. In Western Australia, a curriculum called LO is offered to students in grades 2 to 10 and offers the study of foreign languages. Primary students attended once a week for 60 minutes, while high school students attended 2 classes a week. Within this approach, students are educated in aspects of listening, responding, speaking, reading, and writing within this new language. The languages offered will vary in schools depending on the students' backgrounds. Moreover, language and culture classes were initiated in France during 1973 to help with the settlement of new immigrant children who are moving to an environment with different cultural surroundings. These classes were taught by only Portuguese teachers and only offered during after-school hours and were not compulsory. On the other hand, the Australian education system offers English as a second language classes. This program is offered to students from kindergarten to grade 12, where students are supported with their oral interaction, reading, and writing, and unlike French schools, is offered during school hours.
Language maintenance is the process in which minority languages are preserved in order to continue language use and transfer. France has a large number of regional languages. These languages include Basque, Breton, Catalan, and Alsatian, and are influenced by the languages of surrounding countries such as German, Spanish, and Italian. As a result of policies in France designed to standardize French language, many regional languages are seen as inferior and are therefore not well supported through government policies. Regional languages were not permitted to be taught in schools until the 1950s, when the influence of European policies gained them recognition and led to regional languages being introduced as part of the school curriculum. In the 1960s and 70s, schools teaching solely in a regional language emerged. This led to regional languages being offered as choices as a second language study at schools in France. Australia has many Indigenous languages. While initially there are around 250 languages, as of 2012 there are only 120 still spoken, with just 13 considered strong. Australia and France are both governmental partners with UNESCO's International Year of Indigenous Languages 2019. As part of this, the Australian government has committed to raising awareness of and continuing to maintain the unique Indigenous languages found within Australia. The Australian government provides funding for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander TV and radio broadcasts through programs such as the Indigenous Languages and Arts Program. New South Wales is the only state with an Aboriginal languages policy in order to preserve and acknowledge the Indigenous languages around the state. As you can see, the language policies in both France and Australia are complex and ever-changing across a range of areas,